If you find yourself asking, who am I? That's not a crisis. It's actually one of the most important questions you'll ever answer in your life. But the way that most people answer it, excavating, trying to find themselves, is exactly what keeps them stuck. In this video, I'm going to teach you exactly what identity actually is, why transitions disrupt it, and how to actually rebuild it on purpose. Identity is not discovered, it's constructed. You're not an archaeologist, you're an architect. This is precisely why transitions hit so hard. When we lose a marriage or a loved one, we lose our roles, our routines, the relational context that was actually the scaffolding for our sense of self. Kids leave home, and we lose that sense of being a parent who's needed. A career ends, the structure, the daily sense of purpose. That scaffold all comes down. But you didn't lose yourself. You lost the scaffold. And that distinction changes everything about what you do next. Every major wisdom tradition carries with it the same image: the phoenix rising from the ashes, the caterpillar inside the chrysalis. Baptism, one of the oldest Christian symbols of identity. It literally symbolizes the death of an old life and the beginning of a new life, or death and resurrection. You go under as one person and come up as another, not necessarily better or worse, just different, renewed, fully alive to what comes next. These symbols are sort of maps, and these maps have survived thousands of years because they describe a sort of transformation that's universal to us all. So as we begin, sometimes building a new identity starts with the end of an old self. It may even include grief. And that grief is not necessarily a problem, it's the chrysalis doing its job. So if identity is built, the right question isn't even, who am I? The right question might be, who am I becoming? And is it happening by default or by design? Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is the Hebrew word underneath thinketh doesn't mean just to daydream or to wish. It means to reckon, to estimate the true weight of something before you commit to it. Solomon wasn't just talking about positive thinking. He was talking about creating what you actually believe about yourself. The question really isn't whether you're building. You're always building. The question is whether you're actually the architect. But here's where most people actually go wrong. When life strips away the scaffold, two responses often follow. First, they grip harder. I know who I am. I'm not letting this change me. And every change or challenge seems existential. The second is they go fluid. I'll just adopt whatever is around me. I can be anyone. I just want to fit in. Sometimes it sounds like freedom, but it produces shapelessness. Both of these tend to fail. Identity researchers have studied what happens when the different parts of your life, your values, your past, your roles, your sense of direction actually cohere. They call this identity synthesis. People who have it report lower anxiety, fewer depressive symptoms, and stronger relationships. People who don't, what researchers call identity diffusion, struggle in the opposite direction across every measurable outcome. So healthy identity means stable structure, but with changing content at the same time. Think of a river. The riverbed stays, but the water is never the same twice. The structure equals things like your core values, personal continuity. I'm still me, even as the context changes. The content, however, is your roles and your beliefs and the chapter that you're actually in right now. In transitions, we often feel like identity collapses, but it doesn't have to. The water keeps changing, but the riverbed stays firm. You don't necessarily need certainty about everything in your life or what comes next. You simply need an anchor beneath it all. Once you have that anchor, change after life transitions can actually make that stronger. It can solidify everything about who you are. A client we'll call Daniel, he had what I would probably call a collapse in his career. It felt all of a sudden like 8 years of work had all gone down the drain. He was depressed and unmotivated. He'd tried therapy several times, and every self help and self improvement strategy he possibly could, but nothing seemed to change. And the reason seemed to come down to one unchecked belief: I'm a person who fails at the things that matter most. Each time he set goals to move forward, he wasn't actually building a new identity. He was just adding footnotes to that old identity. And here's an important fact: people rarely act solely on their goals, they act on who they believe they are. Daphne Oyserman talks about identity based motivation. When identity activates, behavior actually follows before you actually decide anything. Just as an example, you can have two people, same dessert. The first one might say, I'm trying to eat healthy. This is a goal. And they keep wrestling with it every single time. But person B, he says, I am a healthy person. I value being healthy. This is a statement of identity, and their decision flows from who they actually believe they are. The most durable change actually happens when the identity underneath it all actually shifts. I'm trying to be someone who shows up, but I show up. I'm someone who shows up. I value showing up. My client Daniel, his turning point was not a new strategy. It was just one word that changed. It changed from fail to struggle to rebuilding. This was a totally different operating system now. So, your behavior after transition and your self defining beliefs underneath it act as a reinforcing cycle. And your environment, who you're with, how you spend your time, either accelerates your progress or quietly dismantles it. And here's why. After a major transition, I hear this a lot: I just need to figure out who I am on my own. I need to go off and find myself. And trust me, I understand the impulse, but the research here screams no, it's a trap. Identity doesn't form in isolation. It forms at the intersection of your inner world and your relational world. You don't just ask, who am I? You ask, who am I in relationship to these people and to my experience, to the story that I'm living in? Belonging is important. Roles don't just describe you, they actually reshape you. A new parent doesn't just add a few new tasks to their life, they actually restructure their identity entirely. A past client, James, he was convinced that he was not a leader, but a mentor at work put him in a leadership position. And in months, he grew into it. The people around you right now are not just witnessing your building of identity, they're actually co authoring it with you. So be intentional about that aspect of your life. But here's what matters even more than any role or relationship in your life: it's not what happens to you, but what you decide it means. My client Rachel, she had a brutal marriage and a brutal divorce. But 3 years after being out of the marriage, she was still defined by it. She would say things like, I trusted the wrong person and I can't trust my own judgment anymore. And this story she was telling herself was costing her everything in her life after what had happened. Your identity is not just a collection of facts, it's a story you're telling yourself about yourself. So the most important variable is not what happened, but how you assign meaning to it. Identity psychologist Dan McAdams, he says, we don't experience our lives as events. We experience them as a narrative. That story is your identity, not a description of your identity. It is the actual thing. You can have two people, the same divorce, the same trauma, the same collapse, but completely different identities. Not because the experience differed, but because their story about it did. McAdams outlines two major stories. That redemptive narrative says that suffering leads somewhere. It can be a turning point, growth, higher well-being, more resilience, or we can have a contamination narrative. This narrative says that one chapter poisons everything. Same events, different stories, different life. Rachel's contamination narrative, I trusted wrong. It proves something true and permanent about me. The work here is not to deny what happened. It's to find what is also true. She survived something very difficult. And the chapter was not the entire book. And I want to put this out here. I'm not just hawking toxic positivity. If identity is a story, that story can be revised, not erased, just revised. Here are three specific qualities of healthy identity. And all three are relevant to whatever situation you're going through right now. And multiple evidence-based practices agree on these three identity qualities. The first is to be flexible, not rigid. After a transition, the temptation is to lock down, to revert back and insist, I must be who I used to be. But rigid identity is fragile identity. You stop growing and call it stability. Instead, say something like, this is who I tend to be, and I'm still growing, I'm still becoming. The riverbed stays and the water keeps moving. That's not instability, that's healthy flexibility. Quality two is to be integrated, not fragmented. Do this quick diagnostic. Think of several different people that know you in different areas of your life. Maybe one at work or in your family, a friend. If they all sat down to describe you, would they recognize you as the same person? Or would their descriptions barely overlap? Fragmentation equals anxiety and depression and relational instability. There's no recognizable self underneath the performance. Integration, on the other hand, doesn't mean identical everywhere, but there's a thread that runs through every room, and it's coherent. After a transition, the thread gets hard to find. The old scaffold is gone, and the work of integration is identifying and nurturing the thread again, the thing or things that run through it all. The third quality is values-based, not label-based. After the scaffold comes down, people reach for labels. I'm someone who's been betrayed. I'm someone starting over. The label feels solid, but it functions like a verdict. I value honesty is more durable than I'm an honest person. Being an honest person can fail from time to time, but valuing honesty is something that you can always return to no matter what, every single time. Values don't necessarily describe who you are currently. They describe what you care about. They actually survive hard seasons. The labels don't. So shift from who am I to what do I care about enough to organize my life around? That question has an answer. If the initial answer is, I don't know, great news is that you get to choose. So, what's actually changeable in regard to identity? Because false hope can also be really discouraging. Things that are more stable over time with regard to your identity are things like temperament, core personality traits, physical realities. These are your starting point. They're not your ceiling. Your temperament is not your character. Your history is not your identity. The following things are extremely highly changeable. This is where your real work starts. Self-beliefs. I'm not enough. I always end up here. These are not facts. They are learned constructs. They are the most changeable things about you. Personal narratives, your story and what it means. Value prioritization. What matters most to you? You choose. Attachment patterns. The oldest ones feel the most fixed, but they're also modifiable. Most people spend the most energy on things that are very stable and that they really don't have that much control over. This is a weird paradox of human psychology, but we tend to seek to try to control things that we don't control instead of actually controlling the things that we can. And they leave untouched the most changeable things like their beliefs, their narrative, their values. Many of my clients through the years have truly shifted and stopped asking, who am I? And started asking, what do I really care about? And am I building toward it? One client told me just a few weeks ago, I don't worry so much anymore about finding myself. And oddly, I feel more at home in my own skin than ever before. So that's it. You were never meant to find yourself. You were always meant to build yourself. So the question is whether you're doing it on purpose. Please like and subscribe. Share this with someone in transition that needs it. I'll see you in the next one.